Welcome, welcome to Globespan. I am Paul Nehru, Tennessee of Guyana, and today we have another program. But before we go into the program, I would like to take this opportunity to wish all Guyanese at home and abroad a very happy 55th anniversary. Next Wednesday, we will be celebrating 55 years of political independence. And for this, before we start the program, I also would like to ask our listeners. I know you like to give your opinions in messages that you usually react and respond to. I'd like you to answer two questions as the program evolves. Name one outstanding achievement in Guyana over the last 55 years. One single achievement. And also, I'd like you to name one outstanding achievement you wish to see over the next 10 years. One outstanding achievement you wish to see over the next 10 years. So these are two questions. As you react to the comments in the program and the discussion, please include these two questions I ask you. Now we have with us today Mr. Timothy Jones, who is a senior counsel and he's the chairman of the ANO political party in Guyana. We also would have Floyd Haynes, who is a businessman, a professor, and also is currently in Guyana because he's investing in Guyana. He's very optimistic about Guyana. And he's also the president of the Roraima Institute. We are waiting for the Deputy Speaker of the House, the Honorable Lenox Shuman, who might be having some internet problems because there's a bit of problem with the internet currently in Guyana. Today we are discussing can third parties bridge a nation that is divided? Can third parties bridge a nation that is divided? Now, we are very honored to have with us today a member of a third party, and that is our chair of ANO, Timothy Jonas. So we'll start with Timothy and ask him, what is this bridge that we have to, and what is this nation divided, and how he sees third parties playing a role to build this bridge in this divided nation. In other words, what are the characteristics, the main ones of this divided nation, this 55-year-old nation?
Well, that's an interesting question, but I think that if we look at it objectively, the answer is obvious. Historically, we have two large ethnic groups that vote along ethnic lines. And if the only options at elections, if the only two options are those two large ethnic-based parties, in that two-horse race, your options are limited. You will either want one to win or the other to win. And therefore you have no basis on which to cast your vote other than ethnic loyalty. You see, the sad reality with us is that both parties have demonstrated that they're not very good at leadership. So if you were to ask the loyalists, the supporters on either side, just in a vacuum, without reference to the ills, the misdeeds of the other party, just what have the accomplishments of your party been? What can you point to as a grand scheme, a grand plan, a grand policy in terms of helping the economy, fixing the social fabric, providing the needs of the people, medical, education? Where can you point to that Guyana has improved during any period that your party has been in power? And even the most staunch, the most uncritical, the most blind party loyalists will begin to run into problems. What most of them do when they're faced with that, when they're confronted with that question, is they fall back to the rather threadbare excuse which is, well, at least our side better than the other side, lesser of two evils. But if they are asked specifically to show achievements, it gets difficult. The thing is that if it's only one of the two parties you got to vote for, then you will vote for the one that you feel loyal to, for the one that most reflects what you look like. And in Guyana's reality, the only way to move away from that is for there to be a third option. Because if you ask your average PPP supporter today, in what circumstances will he vote APNU? No. No way, not possible. And if you ask your APNU supporter, in what circumstances can you be convinced to vote PPP? Not possible. But neither of them, your average voter, is happy or satisfied with his own party. But faced with the reality, either my party or those terrible, evil people on the other side, the end result is inevitable. It is only a third party that can bridge that gap. First of all, by showing a middle ground to reduce the polarization of the society. Second of all, to objectively point out the failings of the two parties, but most importantly, to give the population, to give those individuals, those thinking individuals who recognize the evils of ethnic voting and want to reject it, but cannot vote for those terrible people on the other side. Give them a moderate middle ground that they can take a moral high road and say, I reject ethnic voting, I'll go for a third party. And it will enable the liberal, moderate segment of our society to find a voice and to grow. And that's Guyana's only hope. If I felt at any time that there are insufficient Guyanese in that middle ground who have risen above racism, risen above ethnic loyalty, blind ethnic loyalty, so that we did not have enough numbers to carry us to vote, the end result is depressing. It would lead to despair. So my hope is that, and my belief is that there are enough in that middle ground to change our ethnic politics.
Very interesting. Floyd, what's your take on this and your reaction to the comments of our colleague?
Well, I agree with Tim, but I'll take it a little in a slightly different direction. As usual, I don't really like the question because I think the statement begs the question in this way. The statement says, can a third party bridge the racial divide? And the answer in that statement, one of the answers is in the statement, the third party. Now, having said that, I would ask the question, what is required or what is necessary to bridge the racial divide? And then a third party would be one of those answers. So now let me pivot from that. I think effective leadership is what is necessary to bridge the racial divide. And that leadership can come from first, second, third, any party. It doesn't necessarily have to be the third party. And by that, I mean a leadership that puts Guyana first and that have a plan that includes all of its citizens. That's the kind of leadership I think that can begin to bridge and heal the divide. Now, a third is, or any party other than, I don't like the third party model anyway, but any party other than the two established parties is positioned. But it cannot just be an alternative for the sake of being an alternative. A third party has to offer a vision that differentiates itself from what is currently being offered. You have to give the people direction and protection. You have to put forward a plan. You know, it's the old adage, if someone is drinking a glass of dirty water, you can't just tell them to stop. What you have to do is offer a clean glass. And so a third party would have to come up with that clean glass of water which represents a vision for the nation that is very different than what has been offered thus far. And in that sense, a third party would have a great shot.
Tim, you want to react to what he just said?
I absolutely agree with what Floyd is saying. I think he took your question a bit further than I did, and that your question on its face demanded. There's absolutely no doubt that leadership anywhere, to be effective and to be beneficial, must be sound, must be clear-headed, level-headed, objective, impartial, and there must be a plan. Leadership must be good.
Yeah.
I did make the point we have not had good leadership.
Yes.
That is why we're second poorest to Haiti, despite everything we have. Despite 28 years and 23 years, we are second poorest to Haiti. No one can argue outside of that reality. So we have not had good leadership. The reason the fight continues to be so desperate is because the voters vote notwithstanding the lack of good leadership. They are not voting based on good leadership. They are voting against the people that don't look like them. The third party necessarily will have to earn its votes because it does not have that automatically loyal ethnic base. The AFC discovered that to its destruction when they thought that the 30,000 votes that they had garnered in 2011, and that most of which stayed loyal in 2015, have now disappeared because they don't own those votes. APNU owns its votes. PPP owns its votes. The loyalists on either side will cry foul and criticize and complain and go back and vote the same way next election. AFC did not have that luxury, and any third party will not have that luxury. It will only be able to attract its support and keep its support by demonstrating good, clear, honest leadership. So Floyd is absolutely right. I think he took the question further than you did. Your question was just whether it would help in the ethnic divide. But I entirely agree with what he said.
So you, Timothy, and Floyd, I ask you too, in your definition of the divide in Guyana, it's just centered on ethnicity?
Of course not, Paul. Nothing is black and white.
No, I'm just asking if there might be
The
another
immediate
variable.
answer. I mean,
That,
you know, you like the comments on Globespan, and the people watching on Globespan will immediately say, "Oh, there are 8 Afro-Guyanese ministers in the PPP government," and they will also say the Indo-Guyanese don't carry a majority; they're only about 38%. Those are the standard responses that don't fool anyone. The fact is that the demography of Guyana gives the PPP a demographic advantage based on ethnic loyalty. It is not 50%, but in a race, in a foot race, if we run in 100 meters and you get to start 30 yards in front of me, chances are you're going to win. And that's what we have. We have an advantage given because of the demographic divide. So the system is not fair, but if it's only a 2-horse race, the end result is inevitable.
interesting. At the last election, there were 9 political parties aspiring to become the third party. Since you are in that election, Timothy, and you have acquired a lot of experience in that process, what happened there? Did the atomization of initiatives to become the third party impeded a third party to have done much better? Well, 3 of you joined up and you were able to get into parliament and you have the deputy speakership. So that was an achievement in a way. But what I'm asking is, what would it require now for us to have the kind of third party that you envision that can make this big difference and become a bridge in this situation in Guyana?
I think you made a good point there, Paul. And when we started, when A New and United Guyana started, it started on the premise that AFC had failed its supporters. So when A New and United Guyana began, we didn't just jump out and say we're going to start a party. We, as former supporters of AFC, wrote to the AFC leadership. And when I say former supporters of the AFC, I supported AFC from day one. I helped them when they created, I did their paperwork for them. I helped with their corporate structure. I did their legal work. I was their returning officer when they had their internal elections. I didn't want to be a politician. I didn't want to go into politics, so I was never a card-holding member. But I helped Camaraj and Raphael from day one. And when we saw that they had fallen in with APNU to the extent that they were being subsumed and had not kept their promise for constitutional reform, we wrote them and we said to them, we are giving you a period of time to keep your campaign promise that you made in 2015 for constitutional reform. If you fail to do that, we are going to go to the people directly. Now, we were the first to do that. And if you check the old newspapers, you will see A New and United Guyana formed back in January the previous year. What surprised me is that so many other people felt the same way. So that new small parties began to sprout. Each of those new parties comprises individuals who are patriotic, loyal, love their country, and reject the ethnic political landscape, and therefore reject both parties. But because there were so many new parties coming up, it became a cacophony. It became too much noise. There was no single voice that became realistic. So that the Guyanese voters saw APNU, PPP, and then a noise of third parties that were faceless almost because there were so many of them. But what I want to point out to you, Paul, is that although what that meant is that there was no single third party to draw independent voters to the banner, 10,000 Guyanese in the year 2020 voted for third parties. 10,000. So even in a two-horse race, where really the only identifiable parties that stood out were APNU and PPP, 10,000 Guyanese rejected them. And that number is actually enough for a swing vote. When APNU won in 2015, they won by 6,000 votes. When PPP won in 2020, if you add the APNU votes and the third party votes, PPP won by 6,000 votes. There are enough Guyanese in Guyana, there are enough voters who have risen above, have rejected the ethnic political landscape that those two parties have created and perpetuate. And I think the next go round we will see some fireworks.
So let's shift a little bit. Let's assume, hypothetically, that we have a successful third party. What would be the kind of indicators that we would have to show us a difference in quality of leadership that currently exists in the two traditional parties that will make a difference for Guyana? What, in your opinion, guys, I'm speaking hypothetically, what would be the kind of indicators you'll be looking at? What would you be looking at the level of leadership? They have successfully, the third party has successfully been able to make that success, because it has occurred in other countries. Third parties have been successful. Right now in Chile, finally third parties. In Uruguay, it happened, and it continues to happen. In Ontario, Canada, it happened on the Bob Ray. So there are many cases around the world where people have become disillusioned with traditional parties. But what I want to know is, in light of the kind of challenges that Guyana faces at its 55th birthday today, what would be the kind of leadership that we'll have to have as different from what we have existing today?
Well, Your question directs us away from one central reality that we must all acknowledge and use as our starting point. Unlike those countries that you named, and unlike other countries where coalitions are possible after the elections, part of the grasp that these two parties have created in Guyana prevents those coalitions. So the third party in Guyana will not get government, will not win the government. What the third party will win is the swing vote in Parliament. And that is the question. What can the third party do if it shares majority seats in Parliament with the opposition?
Yeah.
That's the question. What can the third party do if it shares majority seats in Parliament with the opposition? It was a position AFC squandered. They had it in 2011 and they squandered it. They squandered it through laziness, incompetence, and smugness. And it goes back to the quality of leadership that Floyd was talking about and that you referenced. What can ANOG do? What can Anoin United Guyana or any third party do if it shares a majority in Parliament with the opposition? And here's what can be done. First, you can make the statutory bodies that pretend to be independent truly independent. So we heard about people being arrested in the Police Service Commission. That happened today. And I really worry about that. Because if people are removed from the Police Service Commission, what that means is that the government of the day can install people that they want in that Police Service Commission. You saw that there was a scandal and a cover-up in Guy Oil, where they managed to get rid of the ANOG representative in Guy Oil. And that worries me.
Who was your representative?
Because, well, he was appointed, Mr. Blair. Okay. He is a member of ANOG and he sat on Guy Oil. He's now been removed. But that worries me, because what it means is that the government of the day can put onto that board party loyalists who are unquestioning, who are unswerving. And therefore the large contracts, the large award of contracts, the large fuel sales, the ability to get import licenses, all of those decisions are now made, can now be made internally by people who are loyal to the government. A third party with a swing vote in Parliament can change the laws to mandate that the GPL board, the GIWA board, the Guy Oil board, Central Housing Board, that they are all peopled not by government appointees, but by members of the opposition as well as government appointees. Let everybody sit down on that board so that we can look at each other. And when you hear that Central Housing has awarded some large contract to develop a swathe of Gaisuko land, you know that that contract was awarded under scrutiny, not just from PPP who you voted for, but by APNU who also sitting on that board, and the third party who also sitting on that board. Once we have transparency in our processes, and we have transparency where the money is flowing, corruption will be reduced, accountability will increase, and governance will improve. Paul, we are seeing new roads built all over the place now. There's little roads in all of these villages. And every time the road is built, you see it on Facebook. Congratulations to this minister or that minister. Look,
there was one on today.
Every one of those roads is built by the award of a contract. I don't want to hear congratulations to the minister. He didn't build the road. He used taxpayers' money. What I want to see is how the contract was awarded for the construction of that road, because it was not done transparently. And every contract that you see, every bit of construction, whether it's a magistrate's court, a road, a school, a bridge, a stelling, means money is changing hands and we are not seeing transparency. And in each of those decisions where contracts are awarded, if you had APNU in there, and if you had PPP in there, and if you had a third party in there, you would have more transparency. That will be the first problem solver for Guyana. And a swing vote in Parliament can mandate that by changing those laws just in a small way to say the Board of Central Housing must have 2 members chosen from the leader of the opposition, 2 chosen from the government, and 1 chosen by the third party. That's all you need. It is the solution for 60% of our problems.
Why is it that APNU is not on these boards and they have so many seats in Parliament?
Because the legislation says the minister shall appoint the board. Not APNU, not the opposition, the minister. That is why, when you look at the EPA, you saw a well-qualified man removed unceremoniously last year and can't be replaced up to now because he was removed by the minister, and the minister has sole power to decide who he's putting on that board.
So you are saying that in Guyana, it is about loyalty and not about qualifications. It's about corruption and not about accountability and transparency. Am I correct, my brother?
Paul, every Guyanese knows that.
No, we are in a program, and we are in a program. You're the leader of a political party, and it is my duty as moderator. I have to ask you. I can't just not ask you.
Paul, I am
and therefore, I'm asking you it because there are people out there who are listening, and they have a lot of regard for you, and they respect your opinion. So I ask the question again. Are you saying that what I've just said?
Yes, in Guyana,
Good.
Contracts are awarded and positions are given based on family and friends politics, and that leads to corruption because Wonderful. The government has all the power, whether it's APNU or PPP. We've seen,
and it's about loyalty, and it's about not about qualifications. Okay. No, now this brings me to another point. 2 points. In the last election, there were 9 third parties, attempts by parties trying to become the third parties. Do you have any recommendation from your experience about how these third parties, and you have had one because 3 of you got together. Out of your experience, is there any way that all these other political parties can be brought together into one force?
What I noticed during the year running up to the elections was hubris. There was a sense of personal, that you had a cause, a personal cause. And I saw that with each of the people in each of the parties. And that's a good thing because they each personally feel motivated as if they must grasp the mantle and do the right thing no matter what the risk. And the risks are great. The risks are victimization, you're ostracized from both camps, you're persona non grata because you don't fall into one camp or the other. If you're a businessman, you lose contracts. The risks are great if you reject both parties. But a lot of serious patriots ignored those fears and decided that they would grasp the mantle and take it forward. The thing is that each of them seemed to feel that they personally would be able to sway the masses, to direct attention to themselves, and to lead some crusade toward independent voting. The reality is it doesn't work like that in Guyana. You have to have the humility and recognize the reality. First of all, this is a thankless job. You will not get any golden glory at the end because one of those 2 parties will be in government. You will not get friends because neither of those 2 parties wants to see you eroding the monopoly that they have when they hold power. So there needs to be a recognition among the members of the small parties that Guyana must be put first, and that by hook or crook, one way or another, those third parties need to find a way to unite in a single voice so that the Guyanese voter that is looking for an option will see APNU, PPP, and then will see a third option that is large, realistic, plausible, and institutional. And we are slowly getting there.
Are you making an effort currently to get these forces together?
Conversations are always ongoing, Paul, but I won't go further.
No, that's good. That's good. You said transparency and accountability is good. Guyanese people know that you are giving leadership in this direction. And it's interesting. It's interesting. The other question I'd like to ask you is, what is the one issue that you think a potential third party should take up in the context of Guyana today? We are 55 years old. We are at this particular conjuncture that you know very well and you've articulated. What is the one issue that you think a third party can run on to gain some traction vis-a-vis the issue of race and other issues? What's the one issue?
We have to talk about removing secrecy and corruption. Those need to be recognized in every area of endeavor, and it needs to be fought, and it needs to be confronted, and it needs to be removed. Secrecy and its companion, which is corruption.
That's issue running. The thing is that in 2015, the APNU AFC ran on an anti-corruption campaign. That was a campaign when they ran in the election. And they won the election. But then when they got into government, within 6 months, the perception started to grow that they were also corrupt. And
I absolutely agree with you.
And as I look at Peru and I look across the world, by the way, I teach government and political corruption, and I don't run out of materials here in DC or in America or any country in the world.
Can I interrupt you, Paul?
Yeah.
You said in 2015, APNU took over and immediately demonstrated their own propensity for corruption, having campaigned on an anti-corruption platform. And then you ran to Peru, but I was hoping you would run to 2020 and tell us what's your perception today in Guyana. Don't go running to Peru.
Well, let's complete the answer to my question. I'm saying that APNU AFC won the election on an anti-corruption bandwagon, which is a global phenomenon for opposition parties. But when they came to office, within 6 months, they were being accused of corruption. So my question is that if the future third party towards the 2025 elections go back on that bandwagon of anti-corruption, how effective will it be when we had this previous experience?
I think you missed where I said that the third party is not going to win the government, and that the problem that Guyana has always had is that because the government of the day has absolute power in the appointment of people to control the purse strings, there will be secrecy and corruption. So you're right. Before 2015, we had intolerable corruption. After 2015, there was a clean sweep. All of the ministries, all of the statutory bodies were purged, and APNU put in their own folk. And we had a return of corruption. And the corruption, well, they weren't as good as it. They didn't have as much time to learn, but they were trying, and they were learning fast. And they were trying their best, and you saw corruption growing leaps and bounds. But you stopped the conversation there. Paul, today in Guyana, contracts are being awarded in a secretive and non-transparent manner, and corruption continues to abound. So we are having the same cycle over and over. And you ask about the third party. The third party is necessary to change the laws so that the government of the day does not have the monopoly on the appointments and the decision making. They are subject to scrutiny inside the boardroom by the opposition. If they have all the say in the boardroom and the opposition can't look in that door, there will be corruption. The system needs to change so that the opposition, as well as the government, sit in the boardrooms and make the decisions.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to take a break now. And when we come back, we'll continue this conversation and shift it a bit into why is it that today we do not have an effective opposition to be addressing these kind of issues that you've raised.
Allfromonesupplier.com has all your grocery needs, plus all of your West Indian items. Purchase all your groceries and all your West Indian items from one place and get free delivery to your homes and free shipping. Allfromonesupplier.com has free deliveries locally in New York and free shipping to all U.S. states. Our shoppers choose the best items packaged nicely and delivered to your home. We have all your grocery needs and all your West Indian items, a one-stop shop. So place all your orders on allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. That's online at allfromonesupplier.com or call 718-551-3292. Get all your groceries and all your West Indian items from allfromonesupplier.com with free deliveries and free shipping to all U.S. states. Travelspan is pleased to announce Curry Duck Curry Punta Cana 2021. Yep, it's Travelspan Curry Duck Curry with an inclusive vacation 2-in-1 on August 12th to August 16th. Special performances by Terry Godraj, Sexy Marissa, the Tassamen, and the DJs are all going to Punta Cana on August 12th to August 16th. It's fun, games, party, and curry duck curry at VIK All-Inclusive Resort. All you can eat and all you can drink. Travelspan has flights from JFK, Newark, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, and Houston directly to Punta Cana. It's Travelspan Curry Duck Curry and an all-inclusive vacation. It's 2-in-1 on August 12th to August 16th in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. All-inclusive packages include air, hotel, transfers, all meals and drinks from $9.99 persons. Travelspan Curry Duck Curry is sponsored by allfromonesupplier.com. Dave West Indian. Call Travelspan at 212-243-0865. That's Travelspan at 212-243-0865 or book on travelspan.com.
Guyanese around the world are invited to join the Guyana government in an interactive virtual diaspora conference, a new era of engagement for the Guyanese diaspora. It's your chance to ultimately get involved in Guyana's economic transition. May 22nd, 2021, from 9 hours. Register now and get involved. This inaugural conference will be streamed live on media platforms via Zoom. Visit the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website to get registered. Presented by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Guyana.
We are back again on Globespan. And again, we are going to celebrate next Wednesday 55 years of political independence. Guyanese, before political independence, there was not a nation state called Guyana. And for 55 years, we have survived. This is our legacy. Tell your children that. This is your legacy. This is the legacy of our ancestors in conquest, in slavery, in indentureship, and 20th century colonialism. And even in these decades of the 21st century, struggling for a democratic and a developed Guyana. So answer and make comments. What have we achieved? One single thing in these last 55 years. And what would you like to see that we achieve in the next 10 years? So please let us hear your comments. Now I'd like to shift a bit and ask the question. Do you guys believe that, having heard the views expressed by Timothy, that we have a vacuum in Guyana right now of an effective opposition in the current situation in Guyana? Why is it we do not have a more effective opposition? Is it because the APNU, AFC is not doing their work that as they should? Or is it that we have not yet come to terms with the fact that Guyana has embarked on a liberal democratic system and we don't know how to work it? What do you all think?
Let me jump in here, Paul, seeing that
Okay.
I've been quiet, so lest the folks think I've fallen asleep. But so let me jump back a little to the earlier discussion. I think Tim has a challenge, right? There is a smell of regret, or rather, there's a prodigious amount of buyer's remorse on the part of people who were willing to give a third or an alternative party a chance, and they saw their votes being squandered when the AFC decided to cast its lot, hook, line, and sinker with the PNC without consideration for some of their supporters. And it is exactly why Sharon Das said he decided to move for no confidence. So Tim is going to have to overcome that sort of buyer's remorse and the legitimate distrust that people have for third parties. So I want to hear Tim's view on that. And then I thought the combined smaller parties, their first test, this was their first test of selfless love. And what I mean by that, it was clear from most people on the outside looking in that if those parties were to come together, they can get a lot farther than each individual can go. And so the question then becomes, why wasn't the leaders willing to subordinate their own interests in the interest of the country? Isn't that what it's all about? And if you can't do that at that stage, why would anybody trust you to use their franchise effectively once you get power? I thought, to me, that was a good opportunity, and for whatever reason, I thought it was mishandled. And I also want Tim to answer the question about overcoming that. I know Tim personally, and I think he's the right person to lead that movement. But that's me, because I know him. So I want for Tim to speak to the voters out there who may or may not know him as well and have that sense of buyer's remorse or that sense of distrust for any new party coming in.
All those are searching questions. I'll deal with the second one first, although they are of course connected. Long before the elections, ANOG recognized that it would be important to see if these smaller new parties could not come together under a single banner so that they could speak as one voice and rally voters who wanted a third option to a single third option rather than many scattered and undefinable little options. In fact, I can tell you I personally posted, and this is long before the elections. This is when the parties were beginning to sprout up at the New Thriving restaurant at Main Street. A meeting brought the Fed Up, Lenox, Shuman, a lot of the other parties, 4 or 5 of them that were springing up. This was before Robert Badal's party, so he had not even been created yet. It was that early. For a meeting to see where common ground lay and if we should not speak with a single voice. And it was actually at that meeting, at New Thriving, that some things became clear to me. First, if you are a member of a small party now, your thought process is exactly the same in terms of the 2 large parties as all the other small party members. You have joined a new party because you have had enough. And everyone in that room, in that discussion, had recognized that we cannot go on with the vicious cycle of APNU PPP. And that was a common chorus, and there were no naysayers on that point. Those people I spoke to, I think if there were no third option in 2025, they would not vote at all. Speaking for myself, I cannot bring myself to vote APNU or PPP because in both of them, I see the perpetuation of our ethnic divide. So there needs to be another way. And as soon as you cross the Rubicon and you come to that self-realization about these two parties, you can't go back. So that was the first point that immediately became obvious in that meeting. The second point that became obvious was that we were all inexperienced, and a lot of us felt like crusaders, that we had a cause. So, for example, many of the younger folk in the other parties were critical of ANOG, saying that we were retaining a lot of the old members who brought with them some of the old bad habits. Now, that's a nice sounding thing to say, an easy thing to say, but it's completely wrong because age is irrelevant in itself. You can be 65 years old, 70 years old, and have an epiphany and realize that you need a third force in Guyana. And you could have been a lifelong APNU member. And the day you cross that divide to recognize the harm in these two parties and devote yourself to a third party, you're a new person. So I could not have disagreed more with the points of view of some of those parties who said we can't link arms with you because you've got some older folk there who have been with one of the two large parties. Well, so there was a sense of, I don't want to say arrogance because these are well-intentioned, good people who their heart in the right place, but inexperience often makes you feel that you can do grander things than you really can. And without recognizing the reality of limited budget, limited media coverage and accessibility to the public, limited members so that you can't reach both the Berbice, Essequibo, Demerara, and up in Lethem at the same time because you simply don't have the coverage that the two large parties had. I don't think they saw those realities. And we tried our best, but we decided on friendly terms to understand that they were not going to accede to the suggestion of a single voice.
Tim, let me interject quickly, and then I'll continue. I think you're onto something, and for some of the other leaders of the other parties, you know what people would say? Their failure to detect the need for collaboration, failure to detect that subtle, rarely suggests a judgment that almost disqualifies you for leadership. How are you going to run a country when you cannot even detect the need or the urge to subordinate your own interests in the interest of the country? I'm being provocative.
Well, Floyd, I hear you, and I want to immediately say that the people I spoke to, the New Movement people, the Citizens Initiative people, those individuals will immediately tell you the country comes first. I am not afraid of their sincerity. It's not a question of sincerity with them. It was a question to me of the fact that it's easy on the outside to say these people couldn't get together, but it takes two to dance. And if you don't want to dance, however accommodating your partner is, there's not going to be a dance. So
you're right.
It's a bit simplistic to point to all the parties and say, look what they couldn't do. If when you go to talk with the other side, they're not dancing, you haven't done anything wrong. There's no dance. And that's what we found.
Yeah.
But having said that, and this is what I want to immediately say, when things had gone away and the reality of the hard work, the reality of the thanklessness began to hit home, the conversations continued. And it was when we learned and we developed and we grew and the maturity came from those hard experiences that we were able to form that three-party joinder list. So that we didn't have the absolute success we wanted. We didn't get to bring in all of them.
Yeah.
But three of them were able to get together. And I really hope that by 2025, you will have a single third voice, not many voices in the wilderness. I think it can happen. And that brings me to the first question you asked. You see, you talk about buyer's remorse. And here I disagree with you.
Okay.
You see, in a two-horse race, which is what the 2020 elections were, many AFC supporters faced with the option of supporting those terrible people on the other side went back to their roots. They went back to ethnic loyalty. They had risen above and they had embraced a third party. And I can't tell you the euphoria and sense of kinship you feel that I felt when I used to engage with the AFC folk at the mid management level, not at the top, at the mid level, because these were people of all races, of all backgrounds, who were happy to be here in an environment where they were not ostracized. They were not there because of how they looked. And you can't lose that, you know. So I don't think there's buyer's remorse. I think each of those AFC supporters is still there hoping and praying that a party can turn up that allows them to go back with a sense of confidence that they feel will do better than the leaders of the AFC that let them down the first time. It isn't unforgivable what the previous leaders did, but their supporters who supported them not because of their ethnicity, but because they rejected ethnicity, those supporters are out there and they are looking for a home. They voted in 2020 because they had no real option in their view. But you give them an option, and they will be happy to reject that ethnic loyalty and vote policy once again.
Good. Very good.
So I want to ask this question. Why is it the current PNC that has so many seats in Parliament is not profiling as an effective opposition?
Jimmy, one more.
Well, I will invite you to speculate with me. If we are sitting in a room and I have 3 votes and you have 2 votes, how effective do you plan to be? You see, we talk about these words, effectiveness, vibrancy, and that kind of thing when we talk about the opposition. They're not doing their job. If I have 3 votes and you have 2 votes, how vibrant and effective are you going to be? Give a suggestion. You see, back in the 90s, back in the 80s, the 70s and 80s, when they used to rob Cheddy Jaglin, and he had the minority in Parliament, how effective was he? He walked out the Parliament a couple times, he led a couple protests, he burned some cane fields. Is that effective opposition? And when the APNU were in opposition before 2015, how effective were they? A bit more effective when you had some protests in town. That forced some discussion. But really, what did those discussions produce? A constitution that said the president can't sit for more than 2 terms. Nothing else. So how effective were APNU before 2015? And from 2015 to 2020, how effective were PPP as an opposition? Paul, what can you do in the room where I have 3 votes and you have 2? Don't let's be vague and academic and talk in some stratosphere. Don't let's use words like effective. Let us make some solid, concrete suggestions what you think APNU should do today to achieve your aim that you talk about, effectiveness and vibrancy. Because if I got 2 votes and you got 3, I kind of helpless, and I'm stuck.
Let me put it back in another framework then. What Guyana is aspiring to currently in its political system is a liberal democratic system. It's not an autocratic political dictatorship. And I'm speaking in a formal way. So we have a parliament and we have an opposition, and the opposition is supposed to become the alternative government. Are you saying that in liberal democratic system, the opposition cannot be effective because the government has the majority?
You're using a lot of fancy expressions,
No, it's
and I'm
not
going to follow
fancy,
you.
man. It's simple. It's this. It's either you are in a liberal democratic system and you recognize there's a role for opposition, and an opposition in the time of Jagan is a different story. We had a political dictatorship. We had a clear political dictatorship. We are talking now of a system where people were democratically elected to parliament. Isn't there anything more that all these people in the opposition can do within the liberal democratic framework that exists there to be a more effective opposition? That's what I'm saying. Because opposition parties exist in Trinidad, India, Barbados, all about. And they have been quite effective within the system that they have been working. And they have become the government or alternative government and so forth. So this is the point I was making. This is the point I'm making. Or is it that people don't know how to use the system that exists, to work it, so that they can effectively be able to influence the political process? This is what I'm saying. Then, if
Good.
that's the case, we don't need the system as it exists. We got to find another system.
Good. So you use the expression liberal democratic system,
Yeah,
and you say that Guyana has achieved a liberal democratic system.
I said we are working in that system now because we have moved away from the idea of dictatorship of the proletariat of all the political parties that historically from 50 to then are talking about Marxism, Leninism, and the dictatorship of the proletariat and all that. We are talking now of a paradigm shift that has occurred with verifiable, free and fair election been evolving from 1992 to now. There's
But
no doubt about that.
I disagree with you
Okay.
that a paradigm shift has occurred anywhere. Burnham rigged the election, but the system that he worked in where he was rigging the election, exactly the same system. You had parliament, you had the presidency and the executive, and you had a judiciary. And the system contemplated that the party that won the most votes would win the government, and that pro rata the votes you won, you would get seats in parliament. No, he cheated. But that system, as corrupted as he made it, still existed. So now, after 1992, that system works in that there wasn't electoral fraud in implementing the system. But the end result was still the same, that the government of the day controlled parliament by virtue of its majority seats in parliament. And therefore, you did not have a liberal democratic system.
Good.
You had absolute control by the government of two houses, both the executive and parliament. And it leads me back to my question to you. If I'm sitting in the room and I have 3 votes and you have 2 votes, what are you going to do to call yourself effective? You mentioned Barbados and you mentioned India and those places. Those are places where the opposition has a real and genuine chance of winning the next go round. And those are places where you do not vote for someone because of how they look. In Guyana, with our reality, the government of the day has a head start because of the demographic advantage, and therefore is likely to win. The PPP supporters say, and they are right, hard for PPP lose an election in this country. The PPP leaders say that, and they are right. But it's not hard because of the great things they've done. It's hard because of the demographic advantage that they enjoy. So when they have 33 seats and the opposition has 32, the power the opposition has in that house is 0, because 33 beats 32 every time, and we had to go to the CCJ to find that out.
Okay. Floyd, you want to
Well,
make a comment on this?
Well, let me jump in here.
Yeah.
I think Tim is up in a winner-take-all parliamentarian system, particularly the one that we have in Guyana. Whoever wins the plurality of the votes get to appoint the president and run the country. Period. End of story. The president is democracy. So it makes it very, very difficult for the opposition to be able to veto, obstruct, interfere with, or prevent anything from happening that the government in power would want to do. Now, having said that, the opposition, however, I believe can organize itself and presents itself as a choice for the future.
Floyd got cut off a bit. We're not hearing him clearly. He got cut off. Floyd, are you hearing us? The internet. Floyd, we didn't hear you. You got cut off. A big part got cut off. We're not hearing you, Floyd.
I don't know where I got cut off. But
you said
okay.
That you were going down the road that I was enjoying. And then you said, that being said.
That being said, I believe that the opposition, that being said, I believe the opposition can organize itself and make themselves a credible choice in the next election. And to do that, it must be able to articulate a vision. It has to have a plan. It has to not spend too much time relitigating. It has to be concerned with the future. And it has to be able to demonstrate leadership. The opposition has leaders, but it is not exercising leadership. You see, leadership, it is an activity where you engage your constituents and you help them navigate the challenges of the country of the day in order to move their life. And that, I think, it can do. It can organize itself and its constituents and make itself a credible choice. And on that score, I think they're failing.
Well, in a way, you all have brought me to exactly where I wanted you all to go. I am convinced that we do not have a liberal democratic system, that we will not have a liberal democratic system if we continue to be talking about reforming a constitution that should be nullified, be recalled, and be replaced. We have had an institutionalization of executive presidency and party paramountcy since the referendum, the fraudulent referendum of 1980. And as long as that constitution continues, then we will continue to have all the problems that you have listed, Timothy, of why the parliamentary system is not working effectively in the area of accountability and transparency. Exactly why, if 3 votes are there and 2 are on the other side, that you cannot negotiate and get anywhere, because a liberal democratic system does not work that way. And a liberal democratic system has an environment where members of parliament can become independent and cross the floor. If there is a kind of autocracy developing in the leadership of a particular parliamentary political party. So I think that there is an absence of genuine commitment by the traditional parties that embrace that kind of political philosophy that is entrenched in the Constitution. And that is why I believe if a third force is going to be meaningful in Guyana, that third force has to also work on the banner of recall and replace that constitution. That was a mistake that I made in the 1980s when I launched a national and international campaign for verifiable, free, and fair elections. I should have twinned it with a recall and a replacement of that constitution. But I assumed when we founded the PCD that those in the PCD were totally committed. I just took it for granted to recall and replace that constitution. But that did not happen. I could recall in 1996, I had a meeting with Desmond Hoyt in Congress Place about 11 p.m. at night. And we had a wonderful conversation until we got to the Constitution. And he would not budge on it. And he became annoyed about it. I even got a letter, a very nice letter from him. But the point is that unless we have a commitment to that, and a Guyanese in Guyana and political leadership make that a number one priority, I do not believe we are going to be able to address all those issues that Timothy so eloquently articulated that is impeding us from having a more transparent and democratic and, if to use my word, an effective political system that will address the needs and aspiration of our people. What do you all think about that, the Constitution?
Tim's the attorney here.
Tim, I'm only seeing a piece of Tim in the program now for some reason. Tim?
Well, Paul, everyone jumps on that bandwagon, constitutional reform, throughout the Constitution.
I'm saying recall and replace. I'm not saying reform. Recall, replace, and have a referendum for a new constitution.
Same thing. You want to change
No, it's not the same thing, my brother. How could it be the same thing? I'm saying get rid of Burnham Shahabuddin Constitution. The guys are playing with it because they don't want to abandon it.
Now, here's the fact that a lot of people understand and therefore understand why to even talk about changing the Constitution is to waste your time. In our system, the leader of your party, if he loses confidence in you, and you're a member of parliament, he can remove you and put someone else in your seat. The president appoints his ministers, and if he loses confidence in his ministers, he removes the minister. And
I know that. That is because of the existing constitution.
Let me finish, Paul.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Now, when that kind of power is centralized to that extent, that the people who have clawed their way up in their party to the top enjoy that and have created that system to ensure loyalty within their party. You see, if you don't have loyalty within your party, then your power base is weak. Burnham knew that. So you need absolute loyalty. And if you're a member of parliament and you have any concern at all about remaining a member of parliament, you are not going to go against the dictates of the leader of your party. Because if he loses confidence in you, tomorrow he sneezes and you're out. So when Sharon Das crossed the floor and stunned the APNU AFC coalition, their response, and this is a response that I think the PPP will agree with, this is one of the changes we will see in the Constitution. Not because it's good for Guyana, but because the party leaders are determined to maintain the centralized power that they have. They said that's a betrayal, and they want to change the system so that you cannot cross the floor. You cannot vote against the dictates of your party. Now, if that's not a dictatorship, I don't know what is. But you were saying, Paul, that you want to throw out the Constitution. How do you do that? You do that by two-thirds majority in Parliament. So those same people who are sitting there in Parliament, holding their seats at the whimsy of their leaders, and those leaders who are enjoying the absolute power that the Constitution gives them, you're saying that by some miracle, Jesus Christ himself must come down and create that miracle, that two-thirds of those people must vote to agree to change that constitution that gives them so much power. And as soon as you look at it that way, you realize that we're wasting our time even talking about changing the constitution in any meaningful way. We have to find a way to create transparency and reduce corruption with the existing constitution we have. The two parties will not meaningfully change this constitution. Both of them run on a platform of constitutional reform. Do you know what's going to happen with constitutional reform? They'll appoint some committee, go and talk to somebody in the interior and some barber in some barber shop and call it a referendum, and appoint another committee, and nothing will happen because neither party wants to change the constitution. And you will never get a two-third vote in Parliament to change it. So we need to talk about something else because that is a humongous waste of time.
I have a different take on it. I think the third party has got to be bold, brave, revolutionary, and take the issue of the Constitution to the people and work on it. I am telling you, that is the only way out for Guyana.
Well,
We
you do
have to
that.
recall
Your
and
vote,
replace that
what government
Constitution.
there
You
three
should
votes,
not be
tell
afraid
votes of this
of
club.
the ethnic polarization to prevent you from fighting for what you believe is the right path for the country. The right path for the country is to recall and replace that constitution. And you have to take it to the people. You have to be bold. You have to be brave. You have to educate the people and explain to them why is it all the things you have said about a leader having this absolute power. I know about it. I ran into elections. I know
Paul,
what it is to be the head
I say
of the
this,
representative of the list. You have to take it, my brother. The third party would be making a big mistake if you do not fight for it. You have to fight for it. It's not impossible. It has happened. Look, I was
Paul,
arrested in Chile for 48 hours under Pinochet. Today, up to yesterday, I read the political parties have now, after many, many years, look how many years, they now are going to be able to recall and replace the constitution of Pinochet. So it has happened. It can happen. Don't make the polarization of the Indian African thing impede you and immobilize you and make you impotent to fight for what you radically know can help Guyana finally. Guyana has nowhere to go with this existing constitution and playing around with it. How it's the institutionalization of party paramountcy. It is still there. It will continue to be there. It will continue to be loyalty versus qualifications. We will never have an independent public service commission. We'll never have any unless that is in a constitution approved by the people. And we have to have representatives in constituencies. We have to people elected in constituencies. And we don't have that. You elect one man, one party, and not people. So I think, in as much as I agree with a lot of the views you have expressed, Tim, that is one area you and I seem to have a bit of difference in terms of strategy. Is that I believe that fight should be taken on, it could be taken to the people, and it could be won. We can have a new constitution. We could recall and replace that constitution. And unless that happens, I don't see any possibility of institutionalizing a truly kind of liberal democratic system adjusted to the reality of Guyana. So, gentlemen, it's now 55 years next week. The three of us, will not be on the program next week of Globespan. So I give you an opportunity to give a little message or a reflection about our 55th anniversary as an independent nation state. I start with you, Floyd. What do you say to our people on this 55th anniversary?
Well, I would say happy independence in advance. Guyana can be on the move. Guyana can go places. But as I've always said, those who have listened to me, what is required, and I keep going back to this thing called leadership. We have had a lot of leaders. A leader is simply someone in a position of authority, but not all leaders exercise leadership. Leadership, it is an activity that you engage and you bring them along, helping them navigate the challenges to move themselves and their lives forward. That is leadership. And Tim is exactly right. The current configuration of our political system does not necessarily allow for the exercising of leadership. So I say to people, don't worry so much about leaders. Look for leadership. And when you find someone exercising leadership, that's your independence, Guyana.
Timothy?
During the show, Paul asked a question twice. He asked about achievements by Guyana and by Guyanese. I'm curious to see the responses he got, but I would like an opportunity, please, to answer this question. The only achievement that I can think of that Guyanese can be proud of is the fact that in between elections, in our ordinary day-to-day lives, day in, day out, we rub shoulders and socialize with each other without any sense of class structure or social superiority based on race, ethnicity, like you see in many Asian countries, in India, in many African countries, where there is this internal sense of superiority based on some color or caste or something. We don't have that. If you're Muslim, we go into the masjid and celebrate with you. If you're Christian, we go into the church and celebrate with you. If you're Hindu, we go to your wedding. I happen to like Hindu weddings. We go to the weddings and we enjoy it. And there, we get along in a way that is exemplary to non-Guyanese. That disappears at election time, I agree. But for me, if there is one thing that we can point to that we are proud of, is that when you look at the people sitting in a minibus, or you look at the people eating in a restaurant, they're all eating at one table, they're all sitting in one bus, and they are getting along famously without any sense of superiority, any inherent built-in code that I am better than you or you are worse than me. Our relations are good. And I think that is an achievement that we need to build on. But we need to build on it by breaking down the structure of our political landscape that is created by those two parties.
So, gentlemen, thank you very much for this very interesting and very important discussion about a very important subject. And thank you very much for your remarks on the 55th anniversary of the independence of Guyana. To all Guyanese at home and abroad, I wish you the best. I wish our country the best. And I hope that the dreams, the aspirations, the hopes of our people would be realized. And over the next 10 years, we'll see some real qualitative changes that will make us optimistic and make us create a basis for Guyana to continue to exist beyond the next 50 years. So until next time, I'm Paul Nero, Tennessee for Globespan.
It's a pleasure, Paul. Floyd, pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Same here, Tim. Very good.